Hello, this is Gene. There was a viewer that said something about what happened, what the women are doing, and it's the soccer thing. They're suing, and I wasn't really going to do a video on that. I'll talk about it a little bit later in this video. But if a viewer asked me to do a video, I mean, I should at least maybe respond to them and give my thoughts on it. But first, I want to talk about something that this is going to be like a response to Andrew Wilkow. He is on Sirius XM. He's on the Patriot channel. He is a constitutionalist conservative. His first thing is that he believes that he's right about everything, and he says stuff a lot that I can agree with in a lot of ways. But he doesn't have the ability to go further down. So I'm going to just calm out a little bit here, and then after I do that, I'll talk about the women and why they're suing. And this is something I talked about back in 2016, and I'll link that video below, and you can actually see how fat my face was back then. But now looking at me, that fat face actually hide all this other shit that I have underneath my chin. So I'm not being vain here, but I look a lot older than I did back in 2016. I like the fact that I've lost about 35 pounds, but it's probably better for my health. But you know, when you get older, the gravity just weighs down on you and just pulls the shit down to the floor, basically. And there's not much you could do unless you get surgery to get rid of it. And I don't think I'm not that vain enough to have surgery. Okay. Wilkow started the show today. Of course, first he talked about Jesse Smollett. And I talked yesterday in my video that that's low-hanging fruit, and we shouldn't really talk about this. And he only talked about it for maybe 2 minutes, and then he moved on to something else. He liked to correlate it with how the left wants to dominate, and how they do this is through culture. There's these studies out from Vice saying that people should not have babies, and so the left says you shouldn't have babies, but they still want people coming from South America and Central America to come into our country and have babies. So he talks about the culture, and I've talked many times on this channel about that culture and race is linked. And when people like that cannot be honest and go down and make that connection, they won't do it because they're basically being ruled by the same people that are probably forcing this down on us. So he basically said this, and he's like, he didn't really say which people they're saying shouldn't reproduce. He's just saying it's a cultural thing. And then he talks about that New York City is that people's, it's like a city that goes up, and everybody that's packed into a city like that are pretty much governed by a socialist, authoritarian type of governments like the New York, that you can't have any soda after 16 ounces, or if you smoke in the wrong place, you go to jail, stuff like that. Where if you lived out in Wyoming and fewer people live out there, it's more conservative. And so he made that distinction, but he won't go down to what's really the issue here. And the left does not give a shit if black and brown people of color reproduce. They care if white people do. And the lack of courage that he has by not saying it when he just talks about culture, he's basically saying that it's okay. Well, he doesn't want to talk about it because the people that run his channel, the people that run Sirius XM, the media itself are run by the same people. And of course, I would love to get online and talk to him about this, but he would never allow me to get to that point. If I say, I agree to your premise, but I think you don't go far enough, and you're not linking race with culture, because it's there. The West was created by white people. We might have had some help to build shit with other people, but 99% of the things that happened in the West were done by white people. The culture is and the race is I can't say the word, is linked to the West. If we continually people from the third world or the Muslims or whatever, I'm talking about Arab Muslims, not white Muslims, because there are people like that, and they continue to reproduce and they mix with our own women, and we just get breeded out of extinction. The idea that the West is going to survive is laughable. It's absolutely laughable. So when people like him will not go down and make that clink between race and culture, when he says it's all about culture and that it does, and the left just wants nobody to reproduce. No, the left and a lot of people that are conservatives do not want white people to reproduce. They don't want us to be the majority. They don't, because we're the only one that has some sort of variance when it comes to political philosophies. We don't. Our voting demographics or our statistics are not so one-sided to one side over the other. Men normally vote Republican. 55, 60% of them do. We do. Women, 55 to 60 vote Democratic. But when you look at black people and Hispanic people and humans and all that stuff, they're overwhelmingly vote for Democratic candidates. So the left and a lot of conservatives, they're not really conservatives, don't really care about people coming to this country because they want to keep their power. But he won't go down to the next level and say that this is still, it is culture, but it's also, it's linked to race. And when the media continually tells our women to not mate with us, or if they don't want to have babies, wait till they're 30 or 40 years old, and it continually pushes it down. And when we saw on TV and commercials, the black man with a white woman having babies, and it stops your genetic chain right there. And I don't really care if people come in here and say that sounds racist. It's not racist because every other group of people is allowed to say shit like this and say we want to keep our people, not pure per se, but together and to be part of what it was for thousands and thousands of years. And everybody says that's a great thing. Well, I should be able to do that. The Jewish people in Israel is allowed to do that. Anybody in Africa is allowed to do that. Everybody in Japan can do that. In China can do the same shit. But people in the West, white people in the West, are shamed for it. And people like him who knows what is going on, who could be that lightning rod to actually wake up millions and millions of people, he will not go down there because he has no courage and he has no balls. So regardless if he hears this or not, I don't really care. He knows what's going on. I mean, anybody who lives in New York City, he knows what's going on. He's saying that white people are not reproducing. He knows this. All he's got to do is statistics. And he continually says, I'm right, you're wrong, all this bullshit, but he's wrong here. So that's what I want to talk about on that. Now, as far as the women are concerned, it really hurt my heart when I saw that Alex Morgan was one of the women that went on the TV and started, this is back two weeks ago. Now, this has been going on a while, about 4 years. And eventually now, I guess they're going to go into a judge and actually discuss this. And the guy that was one of my viewers had showed this other video, and I watched it. And the guy who's on there is very good. He does the podcast with Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, the blonde-haired girl that is kind of in the alt-right kind of thing. Let's say she's a white enthusiast, and she understands about the differences between the races when it comes to IQ and stuff like that. She's a real race realist. And they're on, they do good stuff, and he does good stuff, and he pretty much shut them all down. But it's not going to make any difference. And I said it in my video 2016 that they're going to find a judge that's going to say that, yeah, we probably should pay them more. And there'll be no reason for it because he showed a chart there. It said that one time in the last 10 years, the women actually made more money than the men. And it was the time that the men didn't get qualified or they didn't get out the first round. So, and it was a very one small time that happened. So what does that mean by me? I mean, back in 2016, I laughed when they didn't get out of the quarterfinals. Because obviously if they had actually studied what they were supposed to do on the pitch instead of worrying about stupid shit like this, they probably would win the finals, or at least the semifinals. I mean, they had much talent to be there, but they didn't get through because they were worried about this. Now, 3 years later, they're coming out, and what we have is Alex Morgan, the very beautiful woman who's a Manchester United supporter, who is the face of women's soccer in this country, with the lesbian, which I like, Rapone or whoever. She's a great player. She's been on that team for a lot of years. But she's the one that's making all these statements on TV. And when he actually said, when we really want to make it apples to apples, both women balk at the idea. When we talk about, because the women's have, their contract are guaranteed, and the men's aren't. Anybody can come in and they can just fire anybody. And the women still want as much as the men, even though they don't draw as much revenue than the men. And they also want the contract to be guaranteed. So they actually want more that the men have. Now, nobody on the men's team is going to come out and go against the women's team. I mean, 3 years ago, Landon Dowden said if they make as much in revenue, then they should get paid as much. And maybe for a 2-week time, that might have happened. But overall, even as bad as our team is, our men's team, compared to other men's around the world, it doesn't mean that they should get the same. And I said at the end of my video that time that they couldn't beat a high school team. So you can't, and they say, well, we have to look at the idea, and this is part of their brief. It's like, we're the ones who have all these championships, and the men have never done anything. So basically at the same time, they're saying that they're being oppressed, and the men suck because they're a bad team, when we all know that the women could never play these teams. I mean, it'd be one thing in this country if everybody was paying the same to go watch them play, and the TV contracts were the same, and then they were still not paying them at the same level. Of course they'd be doing that if that was the case, but it's not the case. So what we're going to do is basically what happened in the NBA. The NBA is subsidized the women's NBA. The NBA makes the women's NBA makes no money, and the NBA has to subsidize them. This is what's going to happen in USA Soccer as well, unless there's a rational judge that says this is stupid and this is how it works in the free market. You need to go somewhere else. Just because this is the only country in the world that looks at women's soccer a little bit higher than the men, because the men are not at the same level comparative against the teams they play. If they were, if we were continually getting into quarterfinals or semifinals or a final, the women's team would not even be, it'd still be somebody to watch, but it would be a footnote. I mean, if it was so important for women to play, the leagues that they've started would be making money, and they don't. And I'm hoping that U.S. Soccer, instead of just capitulating, that they're actually going to go after it and have a real defense and say, based on this and this and this is the reason why they're paid that. And really, when the guy that the video, I mean, he pretty much showed it, that the women still make more per man or per person based on the revenue that they bring in. They actually make like 23% to the men's like 9%. Because the men's make so much more money. I mean, you're talking in the neighborhoods of $500 million to 20 million. I mean, that's so much more money. And why would you not pay professional athletes the same money? So it's just another time that we have to do this and just continually do this for women. That happened in Wimbledon. Serena complained, and then all of a sudden they changed the purse at Wimbledon to be the same as the men. They pay 3 sets. The men play 5 sets. We play them. They get as much money, and they play 40% less. And then nobody wants to talk about that. And they don't want to talk about outside of tennis how women can make a hell of a lot more money than men can. And they don't want to talk about the places that men have to do jobs that women will never go into. They don't want real equality. They just want to find a place to say, we're being oppressed. And this is what they do. It's not like we want somebody to look at this. They just basically say that U.S. Soccer for the last whatever has been sexist to them. Although every year or every 2 years, they continually they sign these new contracts with their own agents. They make sure that it gets guaranteed that every woman gets paid a certain amount of money, and then money after they do something at a World Cup or another thing that they have, they want to renegotiate it. Okay, do that, but don't continually sue U.S. Soccer, because I told you in my video back then that you lost me, somebody who supported you for 30 fucking years, and I have absolutely no. Why would I ever watch you? It is an absolute privilege to play for the United States. They forget this. And I said back then, I could find 11 girls in college somewhere that'll put the U.S. Logos on and do what they're supposed to do for their country. And what it done is probably got past the quarterfinals. Well, I mean, finals. Good Lord. Anyway, I don't really get upset about this because it's so stupid that they can, in their mind, that they believe this stuff. And I really, really believe this. There's 3 or 4 really feminists, 3 third-wave feminists that were on that team. And they just put this shit in the younger players. And they somehow, in their mind, think that they're oppressed and think that the men are getting too much money. Can you imagine when they're all together, U.S. Soccer is together, and can you imagine the men looking at the women and hearing this shit, saying that somehow that they're getting more money and they suck anyway, And because they're so great when they play other women's, that they should get more than them or at the same level as them when they're bringing in so much revenue. Even though they suck, they still, there's only a couple times in history that the women made more in revenue at a 6 months time. When our team did not qualify for the World Cup, the men, and the women won or finished somewhere. That might be one time in the last 30 years that this ever happened, and now the women want to sue on it. Now again, they started this suit back in 2016. So now they're just taking more of this data where the men didn't fail to qualify for the World Cup. So they use this as more ammo to get more money from the United States Soccer Federation. Now, do I think that there's going to be a settlement? Yeah, I do, because I think if there was a real court case that the women are going to lose, but that means that U.S. Soccer will probably do something and what they shouldn't do, and it will just change everything in professional sports in this country. You can't, women who play softball, who get $5,000 a summer, professional softball players, are they going to now sue the MLB, even though it's a similar game? I mean, women and how they play soccer and how men play soccer is almost a different sport. It just is. It's not, women are not as fast, they're not as tall, they're not as powerful, they can't hit the ball as far. Women who play in the goal are so small. Men would score so many freaking goals that they normally wouldn't score against men in the goals. It's just funny. Whenever you see them do their penalty kicks, it's rare that anybody stops them because they're so small and comparative to this goal. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm just going to go on and do something else because this shit really pisses me off. And it pissed me off when it started. They held the World Cup team, the U.S. Soccer, hostage before the World Cup in 2016, and they got exactly what they deserved. They got knocked out in the quarterfinals, and you would thought that maybe that would have wakened up some people, and apparently not. I mean, the older feminists that are in the team will just continually push this shit, and you know it's unfortunately they're part of their echo chambers as well. And how any of these women who are basically they're not oppressed, even if they're still in the 0.1% of wage earners in this country playing soccer. You know, each of them make at least 6 figures a year. Even the person that just barely gets on the team gets at least that. And if they do well in the tournaments, they get more bonuses all the way through. So, but these are all things that were competitively bargained and negotiated for, and they had their agents and their lawyers, and before the World Cup, and then 9 months after that, when they won the World Cup, this is 2016, I think, or 2014, they want to change everything. Okay. Now, USA said no. Soccer said no. And now, some 3 years later, we're going to I guess, to the trial and see what happens. I hope that it is a very logical and rational judge that they get. Anyway, let me know what you think. And what I talked about before, we have to actually, when people say something like this and say it's just culture and they're not really talking about people that are reproducing, or they're not just talking about everybody. No, we don't want black people. No, they're talking about they don't want white people to reproduce because they know that we together we can bring it back, and they don't want that to happen. Anyway, again, thank you for watching. You guys have a good day. Bye.